Hi everyone. Welcome. Hi. If you don't have a name tag, at some point you might want to just surreptitiously creep into the back and get one. Just because that's part of what we do here. We get to know each other by looking at our name tags and waving hello. My name is Ina. This is Mike. We are the co-founders of StoryCode. Who are new people here today? Oh damn, okay, awesome. This is great. We are, as I'm sure you figured out on Meetup, an organization that supports people creating or interested in immersive, transmedia, and cross-media projects. So we meet once a month, usually the third Tuesday of every month. We are currently on a tour, so we're at ITP until next month, and then we'll move our party on somewhere else. And it might be closer to where you live. So tonight we're really, really excited. We have an awesome lineup. We're not going to waste too much time on the intros. We're going to get right to it. We have 3 things happening. We have 2 kind of core presentations, and then we have one thing called a 5x5. 5x5, just so you know, is where we invite members of the community to come up and share something that they're working on that they need some sort of help on. It could be feedback, user testing, just a pitch. 5 minutes, 5 slides. So if you ever want to do something like that on something you're working on, this community is fantastic at giving feedback, and usually the conversations you have in here go beyond this room, and so that's what we do. We try to facilitate that. So for the new guys walking in, please just grab a name tag. If you see your name there, grab one. If you don't, write it and join us. So turn it over to Mike to do the intros.
Yeah, and if you need seats, you can just, there's some seats stacked in the back if people need
grab a chair and
seats.
float out back.
So yeah, as Ina said, we're really psyched about this evening's lineup. So first off, we have Sarah and Katie from the MIT OpenDocLab. I saw both of them speak at South by Southwest and was just kind of really blown away and impressed at the work that they're doing, and it inspired a lot of some of the more documentary programming that we've been doing lately. And so we wanted to have them come and talk about the work that they're doing at the lab and share some of the kind of innovative projects that they're shepherding and working through, and just kind of share with our group what they're working on. So with that, we'll welcome Sarah and Katie from MIT OpenDocLab. Thanks.
Can you hear me? Yes, that's a good test. Okay, so thank you for having me. It's wonderful to be here. I've heard a lot about StoryCode, and it's good to actually see it and see all the wonderful things they're doing. So the MIT OpenDocLab, it was founded by William Uricchio, who's the principal investigator, faculty person behind it. We launched publicly March of 2012. With a big conference, and basically the reason for launching it was that we're at this great moment of change. We're housed in comparative media studies, and we look at media across platforms, across historical periods, across borders, and so we really have this very broad, big picture idea, and it was clear that, as we know, it's a great moment of change. At the Media Lab, they like to talk about the Lumiere brothers and the technologies that they developed and how that really fundamentally changed storytelling. And another person, of course, is Ricky Leacock, who was at MIT, and he was one of the founders, as probably many of you know, of direct cinema, which we really see as a precursor to what's happening today, because he had this vision, and direct cinema was this idea that you could get a lot closer to what was going on, and that also, in particular, Ricky Leacock had this vision that anyone should be able to take a camera and make a movie. And he did, while he was at MIT, he married sync sound to 8mm cameras, which just gave people a lot more ability to make films. And this is a quote from him, which I love showing to professional filmmakers. Having spent most of my life as a professional filmmaker, I've come to the conclusion that I'm not very interested in professional filmmakers. So I think his real goal was that he really wanted to democratize access to filmmaking and make it cheaper and more accessible so that people could tell their stories and capture their realities. So fast forward to today, I think he would be very happy with what's going on today. With cell phones in people's pockets, as you know, there's a lot of videos that people make and put on there, and it's really changing how we tell stories. And as a professional filmmaker, it really means that you have to rethink sort of how you're going to work with the audience and the subject, and that it's a really different role that's required. And as we know, new technologies, we're also, they're changing rapidly. We tell stories with images, we have mobile, and then also data. And we're going to have a data viz today, which is great. And basically, you know, we're living in this world of data, large data, and it's just another element to tell a story. And the other interesting thing about it is we're adding another sense, right? We added sound, we had sight, we added sound, now we're adding touch. And I was at a wonderful exhibit by Sepp Kanvar, who does really interesting data visualizations with algorithms, where he pulls things from the internet into his website and creates stories with them. And he had this whole exhibit, and instead of saying, please don't touch, he said, please touch. And I think that's a key concept in thinking about how we're going to tell stories today. So to sum it up, William Uricchio says, we're seeing new forms that have not yet been tamed. There's not yet orthodoxy for people to fall back on. There's nothing but possibility. So we have this explosion today of people trying all kinds of new storytelling with the POV hackathon, StoryCode, National Film Board of Canada is doing amazing work. Tribeca Film Institute has labs and hackathons. MIT OpenDocLab is a pioneer in showing this kind of work. So there's a lot going on in terms of new storytelling methods. So MIT, where do we fit in? So the OpenDocLab's mission is to bring storytellers, technologists, and scholars together to really reinvent story techniques. And we really want to shape the future of sort of what storytelling is, along with all of you. And we actually have a program where we invite storytellers into the lab. One of the key concepts of innovation at MIT is working across disciplines. So we really try to mix disciplines. A lot of our faculty have, you know, PhDs and MFAs and a lot of different fields of study that they combine. At Comparative Media Studies, we have a Center for Civic Media, and they're really looking at how to work with communities, and we think there's a lot to be learned from people who are really on the ground working with communities for filmmakers and storytellers in terms of thinking about how to engage with your audience and your subjects. We have a game lab, 2 game labs, and there's a lot to learn from them because they're native to interaction. So they really have a lot more thought and experience around that. And of course the Media Lab's right there with all of their new technologies, and CoLab, which also works in communities. To give you an example, the Game Lab came up with this project called Snowfield, which each game that they produce is actually a research question. So in this case, instead of using complex AI to really create a story experience, they flipped the process of creating narratives and then testing it with users, and instead tested it with users first and then created the narrative. And it became a very interesting way of what they thought was creating an organic story. I can't show you the game, but I can give you a little eye candy just to see what it is. And in this, the game is that you're in the battlefield and you have to bring all the people of the army back to the fire or they're going to die for warmth. And it just shows you the level of design and aesthetics. Who we are. So William Rico is the principal investigator. I'm the director. We have grad students, Katie Edgerton and Julie Fisher. Gloriana Davenport, I don't know if many of you know her, but she was really a pioneer in interactive cinema and was working with interactive hyperlinks and participatory media back in the 80s. We also have professors who have their areas of research, but then they use different media to explore it. Chris Wally and Chris Bobel look at deindustrialization. They write books. They have a film about it, and then they also have an interactive project. And Sasha Costanza-Schock, who I'm going to talk about, really looks at co-design and really working with community to create stories and create media for social change. One of our key projects that we started to do, that we did last year, was Moments of Innovation, which really looks at the history of documentary innovation. Katie's going to talk about it more deeply, but basically it shows that documentary has always been at the forefront of innovation. This is a storytelling platform that you don't need a smartphone to send your stories in. You can just use a phone, or you can use SMS and send your story. And it's been a base for interesting projects like Sandy's Storyline, which is a participatory documentary that actually showcased that Tribeca Storyscapes in one. So a lot of interesting projects that we're collaborating on. This is the Exit Zero project that I was talking about, that's done by an anthropologist. And what she's doing with the interactive project is collaborating with a local museum that has all these artifacts and creating a database and a place for the diaspora of this community to come and work with each other and with the artifacts and sort of retell the stories with them. This is Fellows. We have a new Fellows program. It's launching this fall. And again, what it's about also is just bringing people from different disciplines. We have an engineer, a robotic guy. We have a human rights activist. We have a photojournalist. We have filmmakers and gamers. And the idea is that all these different disciplines come together, and from that comes innovation. This is Subi Hellman's project, where she's going to really be looking at what is interactivity. I mean, we all say interactive when you click through it and you have your choice, but trying to really get to a much deeper way of figuring out how to tell a story with interaction. This is by Kareem Khalifa, who's a photojournalist, and he was a war correspondent, and he sort of got tired and felt like the photos weren't making the impact that he wanted to make. So he wants to go much further and really create immersive experiences. So he's going to be coming to our lab and working with our researchers to create installations and games and different ways of creating meaning and impact. Another key feature of the lab and of comparative media studies is we really we marry theory and practice. So we both look at, create things, and then we write about them, and then that research then informs the creation, and the creation informs the research. So we have a lot of ways to create dialogue, from a research forum where people are writing about it to events and salons and different posts from our interns. We also have a conference, the New Arts of Documentary, which looks at the latest trends in documentary. So the key areas of interest that we're looking at right now, and Katie's going to talk about specific projects, is impact assessment. With all these new story forms, there needs to be a whole new way of measuring the impact, and there's different kinds of impact. So we're going to be doing research around that. As I said, co-design and community engagement. How do you really work with your audience and your subjects in a new way that allows them to participate and sort of create a project that has meaning to them and is good. Storytelling as a process. So rather than a story as a product, we think about how the story itself maybe never ends, or as Seth Canvar likes to say, it's a garden and you're watching it grow, rather than any kind of product. And again, as I said, the nature of interactivity, really trying to learn from our game lab about interaction and how that works and what it can be. And there's a lot going on in the Media Lab with virtual and physical. and the tie-in between them and the relationship between things that like robots or avatars or just tangible media objects that can also tell stories. The notion of time, as we're on the web, the whole notion of time changes, right? It can be live, it can be endless. You know, if you create an algorithmic storytelling, then it never ends and you keep on bringing in information. Or if a community actually takes it over. Or it can be 1 minute. Sweeney from the NFB likes to say web navigation is the new editing. So it's this idea that you create your own time in the project. So the whole idea of time is changing. And then you get to immersion, which for us means story worlds and really creating immersive experience, both through like video, explorable environments like videos do, and games, video games do, and also installations and just being surrounded by stories in lots of different media. So this is our areas of interest. And I always like to end with our little documentary mascot. This is Boxy. How many people have seen him? Yeah, a lot of people, but not everyone. So he has now been recreated and shown at a lot of festivals, at documentary festivals. But he was made by a researcher, who's one of our fellows, Alex Rubin, who just really actually wanted to look at the relationship between nature, between people and machines, and made a little documentary director and wanted to see how they reacted to it. And you can see for yourself.
I need help. If you can help me, press the green button on the side of my head.
The project is Boxy. It's an agent that we put out to try to gather stories about a particular environment autonomously. That is, we send it out at the beginning of the day, hope that it will find people, and then ask them questions and find out about the environment.
Hi, my name is Boxy. I'm from the Media Lab and I'm making a movie about MIT. On the side of my head are buttons, so you can give me instructions. If you would like to be part of the movie, press the green button. If you want me to go away, press the red button.
So the robot was purposely made unintelligent. That was to keep weight, cost, and complexity down so we can send multiple robots out. On the flip side, we wanted to see if we could leverage people in a symbiotic relationship with the robot in order to capture goals of the robot. So if the robot had a particular story captured goal, we wanted to see if we could use people to accomplish that goal.
What is your name?
Santiago.
Agnes.
Hello.
Celine.
We chased after this elusive thing called cuteness, that we wanted to make people feel empathy for the robot. That is, the robot would wander around, look helpless, get stuck, look like it doesn't know what it's doing, and hopefully someone will feel bad for it and help it, and asks them for that help.
I need help.
We have a very simple microprocessor and a board that generates audio, along with a few sensors, and we kept it very simple in order to keep the cost down and complexity, and also weight. We couldn't have a very heavy robot for people to carry.
I'm really short. Can you put me on the table or help me so I can see you?
The final iteration was supposed to be made out of plastic, and we did that and it came out scary looking. Everyone that saw it agreed that it was scary and that all my cardboard models looked organic and very friendly and soft and able to be approachable. So we went back and actually used the prototype design to be the final design of the robot.
I'm trying to see what everyone does around here. Can you tell me what you do here?
I do work with Alex, so you're on. Actually built it.
Neat! What other things would you like to tell people about yourself?
Nothing in particular. I like this little robot though.
That is really cool. I'd like to take a look around. Can you take me somewhere interesting?
Sure.
Press the green button when we're there so I know to start paying attention. You can tell me about things on the way.
Okay, I'm going to take you to my research group area. So now we're leaving the new building and we're going back to the old building. And you can tell when we're in the old building because everything isn't white anymore.
Wow! Good choice. This place is neat. I'd love to put it in my movie.
So people either really like the robot or really hated the robot. And we found that people that liked the robot would treat it very nicely, as found through acceleration data. And people that didn't like the robot would treat it roughly and throw it on the ground and not hold it properly.
Bad robot. Bad robot.
Let's go upstairs, the third floor.
That was alright, but I think my movie needs something really special. Do you know any cool dance move? I put on some music so you can rock out. Here we go.
We hope that this type of interaction that we studied will lead to simpler systems that may be more symbiotic with people instead of just trying to be a cold system without much interaction. We think we could use this simple sort of emotional tie to create better systems and better interactions for people.
Make better documentaries. Thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm Katie. I'm a research assistant at the DocLab and I work with Sarah. And I'm going to be talking about some of our specific research initiatives at the Open Documentary Lab. We call them research because we are a university, but a lot of them are public programs and public projects as well. So one of our most recent upcoming projects is the working title of what we call it the MIT DocuBase. And we're hoping it will launch this fall with the help of a grant from the NEA. And basically what we're doing is creating an index of interactive documentaries. This project came about because one of the most common questions we get from filmmakers and people who are interested in the lab is what exactly is an interactive documentary and where can I find them? So we wanted to create a website that aggregates a bunch of them and will help answer this question. In a certain sense, we see it as an IMDb for documentaries. We want it to be both a resource to the field, so including information about how these things were made technically, how much it costs to make them, who was involved, the kind of things that a person would want to know if they want to create their own interactive project. But we also want it to be a space for community dialogue. We want to try to create this website, and it's still in development, but make it as interactive as possible. So people can create their own playlists, can comment, can write reviews of certain documentaries. We're going to have a curated, sort of a curated playlist section where we have leaders from the field come in and make a list of their 10 favorites and talk about why they like these documentaries in particular. One of our other goals with this DocuBase is to hone language. I feel like this field is so new, there's a lot of terms that crop up. We hear transmedia, we hear cross-media, we hear multi-platform. There's a new buzzword sort of every other week. So one thing we're going to do is track the words that people use about these projects, see the tags that are most useful to people, and make that information public. So see what people are calling certain documentaries and then try to create more of a language for the field. And this is designed by Untitled, which is a fantastic French interactive company. They did Alma, A Tale of Violence, and Prison Valley, and a few other interactive documentaries. So this project grows out of the Moments of Innovation project, which Sarah mentioned, also designed by Untitled, which was a collaboration between us and the OpenDocLab at the International Documentary Festival in Amsterdam. And our goal with this website, you can visit it at momentsofinnovation.mit.edu, was to put all the recent developments and innovations in storytelling in a historical context. William, our PI, always kind of says nothing new is really new. There's a long history behind it. And one thing we learned in doing the research for this was that storytellers are always on the forefront of technological innovation. So almost as soon, it's kind of eerie, almost as soon as a new technology pops up, storytellers are there kind of repurposing it and using it to tell stories in new ways. And we also wanted to sort of divorce the idea that storytelling innovation is linked to any one technology, that this is something unique to the digital revolution. Happened long before and will probably happen long after when we actually are making movies with robots and all the rest of it. So Transmedia, all of this is nothing new. William, our PI, he has this great line. He says, the ultimate transmedia phenomenon is the Catholic Church. You have the Bible, you have stained glass windows, saints are the original spin-offs. But there is a long history to all of these things. So another thing we're working on, and StoryCode has some great case studies that I was looking at the website, but is getting case studies out about the field. This is an initiative that we're just launching. MIT researchers and grad students are basically sitting with makers who are creating interactive work, interviewing about their process, writing their challenges, the successes, what worked, what didn't, and publishing it as a resource for the field and trying to help create a set of best practices. Eventually, the case studies will cover a wide range of topics, but the first ones that we're focusing on participatory storytelling. How can filmmakers create a narrative, working with communities, trying to bring more voices into the story? We're working on a case study with Hollow, which is a fantastic interactive documentary. If you haven't checked it out already, I highly recommend it. I think they're coming to StoryCode next month. September. So we're working on getting a case study out about their process. And also Julie, who's another MIT grad student, is doing some case studies with Video for Change, which is a social justice organization, and talking to them about the work that they're doing. We're also working on impact assessment research. Impact is a huge issue in the field, especially for social change documentaries. And we're working to establish best practices to assess the impact of participating audiences and community members participating in a story, whether it's through co-design, which is when community members are involved in a storytelling and design process from start to finish, or some other way, such as donating money or contributing content or interacting with a story online. There's so many different ways to contribute and interact with projects today, and measuring the impact of that is something that we're working on how to even begin to do. So we're looking at this particularly through the lens of transmedia activism, which Sasha Constanza-Chalk, who's a professor in the faculty at MIT, is writing a book on and doing a lot of work in that space. We're partnering with the Tribeca Film Institute and other stakeholders to examine how participatory media can be used to enhance social justice initiatives, and our goal is to create kind of a tool for measurement and help build some best practices in that space. And also working with Engaged Media and Video for Change, doing some case studies of their impact work. We're also recently partnered with Filmmaker Magazine to publish a series of interviews with interactive producers. I believe it's called the New Digital Storytellers or Storytelling Series, which turned out fantastic. I think it's about 12 to 15 interactive producers. And we talked to them about the nuts and bolts of their work, what their goals were, how they achieved their projects. We have interviews with people like Kareem Khalifa, who is the filmmaker behind the Emmy Award-winning interactive documentary High Rise, who will be a fellow or visiting artist at MIT next year. Kamal Sinclair from Sundance, Jesse Shapins and the team behind the Ziga platform. So I highly recommend you check that out. Our goal was to sort of talk to people who have made the leap to interactive work and give a how-to guide for people who might be interested in doing that as well. So we also want to especially being part of a university, bring scholars into the conversation. So we created a research forum on our website. You can go at opendoclab.mit.edu. And it's a space for academic discussion about interactive documentaries. Our PI, William, just wrote a really great essay about narrative and documentaries in comparison to games and play. There'll be another one coming out that he wrote about engagement. And Arnaud Castellis, who's a research affiliate with us, is doing a historical study placing interactive documentaries in a wider development of digital media at large. So it's an interesting space, and we hope to get more and more people contributing in the coming months and even years. So in another project in the spirit of creating a critical dialogue and discussion about interactive docs is the Creating Critics program. We just had the inaugural version of it last year to help sort of create a new generation of critics. And we see film critics, even video game critics. There's a whole lot of criticism just in newspapers, magazines, blogs, but not as much about interactive documentaries. So we really want to get people talking about interactive projects in a serious, critical way, reviewing them. So last January, two MIT graduate students went to Sundance and wrote about the New Frontier projects, which is their experimental exhibition all about expanding cinematic storytelling, and published those on IndieWire as well. But we want to really keep this program going and try to create more criticism about interactive projects. So in some summary, it's just sort of a smattering of the activities that are going on at the Doc Lab, and we'll hopefully have more rolling out in the coming months. So thanks.
Last thing we wanted to end with is ways to get involved. So we have a lot of events here. We have salons, and we have a lot of people who come through MIT that we have that speak. We're doing our best to get those online so people can watch them. We have courses if you're local in Boston, games courses, interactive fiction, and our flagship course, New Documentary Technologies and Techniques by William. We've started workshops, we'll be doing more, in particular, again, really looking at the intersection of games and filmmaking, and again, new techniques in storytelling and technology, and we have residencies. It's all on our online, there's fellowships, and they're not paid, but you can come spend time with us and work with our researchers. So that is it. And here's our contact information, website. Contact, Twitter.
We have time for questions if anyone in the audience has questions.
I guess, what's your relationship with the Media Lab? Because, like, for example, Professor Davenport used to be, or maybe she still is at the Media Lab.
Yeah, so the way I describe our lab is we're a documentary lens over all of MIT. So the vision is that there's faculty and researchers and students working across the institute, and we're kind of a hub for it. So we work with the Center for Future Storytelling, we work with Gloriana, with Seth, with all kinds of things. So it's all there.
I have two questions about that robot.
Yeah.
First of all, what is all the audio pre-programmed, or is only audio live with somebody on the other end of the microphone, or is it both?
It's all pre-programmed. And then there's a set of different questions, and I guess, yeah, I think it's kind of, it's robotic.
You have to go to Alex for the technical details, but I'm pretty confident that it's pre-programmed audio. I'm not, yeah.
But Alex Rubin, and you can go to our site, email, he can give you all the details.
The other question I have about it is, what we saw is sort of a description of it with a couple of excerpts.
Yeah.
Did it actually produce a documentary, or
yes,
is it something that's separate from the documentary about the documentary making?
Yes, good point actually, because this is just about Bossy. There was, it showcased it for DocLab, and there were a bunch of little mini boxies, and you could take them and it would ask you these questions and you could answer it. And then Alex worked with Brent, of an actual professional filmmaker, and they edited it together. And you can see it online, I think, on YouTube.
LabDroids, is that?
LabDroids.
LabDroids.
But yeah, so there is an actual documentary made by this robot.
I've seen one or two documentaries of this. Is it a pure documentary, or is it a documentary that includes the description of how?
No, it's a pure documentary. It's taking all the footage that the robot got. And it's an interesting experiment because it asks some pretty, intimate questions, and the people tell the robot all kinds of things. And that's also part of it, is looking, it's kind of like Errol Morris theory, like if you look at a robot and it's not actually a person, will you tell it more or less? And how are you going to relate to this machine? And it's amazing because they're really cute that people tell this robot a lot of things. So, yeah.
I have a question. So what is the current buzzword that's trending these days?
I don't know.
We have a whole bunch of words we're using. In our database.
Yeah, exactly.
We don't
a lot of people point fingers at questions.
So, transmedia, that term was coined at Comparative Media Studies, Henry Jenkins, but we don't use it. And I think even the people in, I don't know how Henry feels about it, but it's been pretty widely used in a way that's quite far from the original meaning. So, and we tend not to use that word, so I can tell you that. But in terms of other buzzwords, I think immersive, is a big buzzword. I see, what's the word I was talking about the other day? Responsive design. But it's actually interesting, part of in our database, we have all these tags and ways to tag it that use all these descriptions, and part of our research is going to be able to watch the trends with that. And when a word gets used a lot more, like cross-media versus, transmedia, and we'll decide, like, okay, this word's not really being used, they're not tagging it, we're gonna take it away. And oh, look, this word's appearing a lot, let's put it in. So it'll even be a way to study the language of this word, because there's a lot out there, right? There's no common language yet.
I have a question. Where would I go to find more about the video game process that was, because I understand what they're doing, but I'm interested more in the process and how they actually pitched this to potential users or that whole process. So where would I find out more about it?
So this was made by the MIT Game Lab.
Okay.
If you go to our website, they're listed as a partner. Philip Tan is the creative director. He'd be the key person to
Is it a
contact.
very secretive thing, or?
No, it's out there, it's done.
Okay.
The actual maker of it is just moving to New York, Matthew Weiss, but I'm sure I'd be happy to talk to him about it.
And they should have contact info, and I think they have research statements on their website, so
Yeah.
you should find a lot of information there.
Do you have a resource for tools, current tools that we use in Transmedia/interactive documents?
Yes. Yeah, keep going on here. But on our website, under research, there's a little category called resources, and it came out of our Filmmaker magazine series, because that was a how-to, and we also listed a lot of resources. There's tools, there's platforms, there's festivals, and StoryCode also has a great resource for that too. But
We'll
you
check
can
that
find a
out.
lot there.
Is anybody doing much research in terms of funding and NFB, God bless them.
Yeah, we're all jealous.
We could not have an NFB.
Yeah.
But not just how to get funds through granting, but also how to draw audiences to this material. Because,
So are you talking about more like business models?
No, I'm just talking about the capacity to get things made.
Yeah, it's
I'm
a
not
big
talking about
question.
trying to profit, but to get things made and to get things seen, not
Yeah.
necessarily through a business model.
Yeah.
Trans business.
Well, I
Business
think
model. An immersive business model is something to get it in the pipeline.
Absolutely.
I mean, I'm amazed at how many people, intelligent, literary, movie people I wanted to never even heard of out my window.
Right.
And that's not, it's so many, so is there work on how to
Get it out there.
Yeah, as opposed to hoping people will show up.
Yeah, so when we started this lab, part of the issue was there isn't a large infrastructure holding it all up, right? There's Hollywood for films, what have you, but where's the infrastructure for this? And you can slowly see it building. That slide I had where it had Tribeca Film Institute and StoryCode and Sundance, and now Cannes Festival just this year premiered an interactive area. Sheffield has them. So places are starting, festivals are starting to show this work. We want more funders to jump in the game and start funding this. We're in a moment of transition. There isn't a lot now, but it's growing slowly. I can tell you at MIT, there are a lot of people at Sloan, the business school, who want to create new distribution platforms. I've had several people approach me about that. So it's happening slowly, but it's still, as I'm not going to say which foundation said, it's fringe. So we're working to get it in the mainstream.
And this might not be exactly what you're looking for, but in the DocuBase we will have where people have gone for money So that information about past projects and sort of how they piece together budgets will be in there.
But is there research going on in terms of the audience for this material? Who's seeing it?
Well, that's our impact assessment that we're just starting. I'm trying to think who else is out there doing it. It's more about how to measure it.
Anthony Kaufman also wrote a piece in prior.
Who?
Anthony Kaufman.
Right. Yep. Anthony Kaufman definitely writes about this area. But yeah, I don't know.
Do you have a working definition of interactive documentaries that you use?
Actually, Arnaud, one of the research affiliates, he is doing a lot of work in that area, and he went around and interviewed a lot of the key people in the field and asked them that question. So we don't, William will have one, everyone, there's no set definition yet.
And we're a big tent too. I mean, I think we want to draw from as many disciplines as possible.
Right. And I don't think we're ready to settle. I think there's a lot of ideas out there. He has all these video profiles. We'll be showcasing them one by one. And everyone has a different definition.
Would you have any particular elements that you have, are there like 3 things that have to be present for it to be an interactive documentary?
Not at this level. At this level, it's let's look at all the possibilities and not define it yet. And then as it grows and becomes older, we will. Maybe we'll come up with a definition for open documentary.
In your mind, does immersive automatically mean it's interactive, or is it possible to have more linear story experiences that have elements that make them more immersive?
Yeah, I think you can. I think immersive can, people define it differently, but to me it's a story world, and so it can include linear, it can include interactive. I would say we would want more than one platform. It's not just a linear film, that's the one thing it's not, but it would be something that creates a story world that's in different platforms. And we have different definitions. I mean, there's different ways to immerse. There's at the Media Lab, they're building some surround sound and, literally with the technology. Games obviously have a lot of explorable environments. That's immersive.
An emotional version of traditional filmmaking, so there's a lot.
Yeah, I mean, in fact, in our Moments of Innovation site, if you go there, one of the categories is immersion, and we define it as as sort of creating something that makes you feel like you're there. And so we look at the long history of that, starting with stereoscopy, where in the 1800s they had these little camera things that or I guess they were glasses kind of, that made a 3D version of a photo, and people were obsessed with them, and it created this 3D immersive sort of experience, and that's what people used until cinema came in, and then it went away, but it was a mass medium. So the desire for being there and being present somewhere is always there. That's how we define it.
Based on the seeming success of Snowball, the are you seeing any kind of ripple effect from that yet?
Absolutely.
Are media organizations becoming more interested?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that one is huge, and it was a great success in terms of even something that's truly interactive. And also, I think the whole process was really different in how they worked within the news organization. And I know for a fact now that they're really continuing that, and other news organizations are trying to really sort of look at multimedia storytelling in different ways. So I think it has a huge role.
The Guardian has a piece called Fire, and that's sort of in a similar vein, but I think there's more and more.
I mean, the journalism world too is definitely moving in this. I mean, I didn't talk about this that much, but it really is a convergence of a lot of different disciplines besides the ones in our lab. But journalism, the arts world, the film world, the tech world, it's all these different places, and they're all working with this.
Last question, Sasha.
Traditional documentary has traditional revenue streams, and if you look at interactive documentaries, what do you see as the more reliable, or the things you would tell a finance here that these are the revenue streams?
Yeah.
interactive open documentary?
So that business models. So we're seeing more foundations. You know, documentary is good for foundations. We're seeing more foundations sort of start to fund this stuff and wanting to fund this because it's becoming more mainstream. Another interesting part of this is because it's the convergence of storytelling and technology. You see people taking the tools that they create for their documentary and trying to make a model out of that and sort of scale it. So there's that whole way that people are going.
Sort of startup culture.
Yeah.
I mean,
the entrepreneur.
As far as content?
No, it's content. I
As
just
far
think
as-
it's trying.
I mean, I mean, you really put your finger on it. I think as far, I mean, content-wise, there's not. I mean, the only thing is like the subscription, but that's just Jonathan Harris's. I love your work. It's the only subscription-based, interactive documentary.
Do you see anybody tying that into the storytelling?
I don't understand.
Ideas of revenue streams, tying them into the storyline and making it so.
I think you should do it. It sounds like a good idea.
Inside of a immersive documentary, is that what you mean?
Or kind of opening an audience into wanting to support continuing with that storytelling. Do you see
Like
any examples of
Kickstarter?
that?
You mean like Kickstarter?
Yeah, not Kickstarter, like you're telling a story and people get really involved, they get really passionate.
Choose your own adventure, and you stop, and you're like, you want to see what's going on, you go, okay.
No, so they get paid to continue making the rest of it. I don't know, you see like examples of
maybe
it's a live documentary, but the documentary is living in a sense where it's constantly being funded by those who are passionate by it.
Kickstarter is a great example of collaborative storytelling because you build your audience from the beginning in your community and they tend to support you
And I think
all the way through.
you would find more examples of that in web series. I mean, these things they might continue, but I think they sort of tend to launch as a unit, and people might contribute content further on. I mean, web series, because they're rolled out over a longer period of time, you know, you'll get funding for the second season or something, but I haven't seen any.
Still.
Well, thank you very much.
So normally we would have our 5x5 at the end, but the presentation, the second presentation, for technical and other reasons, decided to go last. But you're gonna want to stay for that. So I'm going to introduce Meenakshi through her code. Did I say that right?
Yes.
Okay, good. She has a project she's working on that she's going to share with you all, and at the end she'll tell you what she needs. And it really is 5 minutes. You're on a timer, and and then if you can fit in a couple questions in there, great. If not, then you can talk to her afterwards. Thanks.
Okay, this is going to be a 5x7, I'm sorry. And that's a GIF, I don't know how that got, but so I'm more of a storyteller, and I'm not, I came to making this project that I'm going to talk to you about called Isha Tell All Tale, which is, I'm an artist and a writer, let me start there. And what I've really been concerned about are issues of race, gender, sexuality. And so a lot of my work as a writer and an artist and a curator was about that. And I decided, I worked in film in India, and then I came here and I was pretty much in the contemporary art world. And I decided that the story that I really wanted to tell was that of an immigrant South Asian woman's journey through the New York art world. And I thought that the best non-linear sort of narrative style that I was interested in, which I'll come to why non-linear, was soap operas. So it's actually a soap opera about a woman's journey through a very competitive, sort of ambitious career that she wants to choose, and the balance between having a career and then having sort of cultural and society's expectations and perceptions of who you are and who you should be. So these are just actually, characters in the soap opera. So I've been pretty much filming it very DIY. It's, those are gallerists and rich collectors, and these are, creepy, collectors who sort of meets when she's in New York. Before this she goes in a very protected sort of environment, home, and then comes to New York, and it's this world that she's not very familiar with. Now, one of the reasons I'm here is because when I started out, I thought about a story that I just wanted to read, that would reach out to different audiences. I didn't know what transmedia was or cross-platform was. I mean, that wasn't familiar, but I just thought that I wanted to tell a story on multiple platforms, so that someone who's like my grandmother sitting in Jackson Heights would want to watch it, or like some kid in Brooklyn who just like moved there from the suburbs and wants to be an artist, like would also relate to it. So it was very organic in terms of how I went about looking at these platforms in which I could tell this one story. And so one of the things was that one element in this project is that there are slippages. So this is a story about a woman who's a woman of color and who comes here, and I'm talking a little bit about privilege, because privilege is not just about white privilege, but there's brown privilege too in some levels, because I come from an upper middle class family, so I had the privilege of an education and coming to America and trying to make a life. So what does that mean, and what does that context mean for me here? So what I do with slippages is that the story sort of goes into these vignettes where like the race changes or the gender changes, and so it's basically a web series where you're watching certain episodes and then you get to choose how the story moves forward, and that's basically one of the ways in which you sort of probably encounter these different sort of contexts. And the first thing I did, I screened parts of what I'd filmed at Bushwick Open Studios, where we created this set, and we had audience members who sort of came there as part of Bushwick Open Studios. Is just a weekend event where artists open up their studios, you could go see their work, in galleries have shows. So I just created a set, which I also did at this other organization called No Longer Empty, and people who just came in there to see an episode being filmed got to also be a part of that episode. So they got to play roles of Isha, or Isha's partner, or a mother-in-law, and and I'm sort of filming them, and so when I edit it, that kind of goes into the slippage, so they are also sort of invested in it. And if you see the little screen there, those are actually kind of documentary style interviews. So I've used non-actors, they're artists, they're writers, they're friends, family, and they all play roles that I script, but they also have their own stories, so I'm sort of collecting that, and that would kind of become a part of the online element. Another aspect, another way of sort of like involving the community and the artists was to create this participatory urban game, which happened at this year's Bushwick Open Studios. Basically, these are just, that's sort of like a map. What I did was, like I said, there are hundreds of studios that are open, and I realized, what if I create a game where there are 3 parts that you can choose: love, fear, and ego, which are part of like the story. And then you solve clues, and you kind of end up going from one artist studio to another studio and experiencing their work as a way of understanding the broader context the story is talking about. So I sort of did like QR codes that you could scan and then go to the Tumblr site, which has 3 doors behind which, so you choose your start and you kind of move on from there. And so this was some of the stuff that happened. There were artists who at Silent Barn who created these costumes. So if you ended up there, they kind of wore these costumes and posed and took pictures, and they either tweeted that and created a storyline and had hashtags. There were hashtags for the game, or they would Instagram it and sort of, so these are artist studios and those are participants. There were artists who were in the street sort of handing out their artist zines that talked about, for example, First Amendment rights, and so it's like, those who are playing the game to kind of end up meeting an artist and then having that interaction, and it's all, at the end of it, they landed at a space where they could watch an episode from the soap opera. So I'm sort of like segueing into what I also do now, which is Director of New Media at Bushwick Film Festival, which also kind of happened really by chance. It's like I met the founders, I think Kuebe is here, and there's also Casey, and we are sort of, the festival is basically October 3rd to the 6th. And like I said, I mean, for me, I love the idea that technology, initially it was more, I think, intimidating because I don't really come from a technology background, but then I thought maybe technology sort of creates a gap, but then when I talk to a lot of people in the field, it's almost like they're using it to actually bring people closer together and tell more stories and make it less about the technology and more about the story. And so this is something that I'm doing with the programming for the festival. It's the first year that we're having this component. So we're working to have, some of the things in the program are Bushwick Diaries, which is collecting stories of people around the neighborhood who've lived there for decades or just moved, and we're using Cowbird as a platform to actually tell that story. We've kind of written to them and we kind of collaborated and just create a collection of those stories, kind of like the Sandy Shoreline project that they had. Then, there'll be online, there are panels, interactive projects, immersive experiences around Isha, where we're just going to take certain stories and you get to be an actor in it, so we're working on that. And then more 5x5 presentations, which would be an interesting aspect. In the long term, we really want to be presenting more projects like that, producing, and probably also creating a lab where we can actually bring different collaborators. That's like more long term. So what I'm looking for essentially with Isha is really collaborators, advisors. Funding would be great too. And so if there's any part of it that's interesting, that just feel free to reach out to me. You can mail me. Even with the film festival, really just collaborators, advisors, what could be like, well, we're talking about business models, but that could be an interesting conversation, and projects that could be part of the festival or at a future date. So feel free to mail me. I know it's a lot of things, but just feel free to come and have a conversation, and I'd love to talk to you about it more. So that's it.
So if you have questions, hook up with her afterwards or grab her email. If you ever do this, guys, if you want, you can always reserve a minute or so to ask questions of the audience, but we ran out of time, and we're super, super excited for this. So.
So while they're setting up, so we're really excited because at StoryCode we really try to bring a broad spectrum of programming to these events. And so we've had interactive documentary projects, fictional work, our story hackathons are fiction-based, and one area that we really haven't focused in yet is data visualization. And so that is what we are about to learn about. So we're really excited to welcome Wesley Grubbs from Pitch Interactive. We've been following Pitch's work for the better part of 5 years, and I reached out to Wesley, and we were lucky enough to have him coming into New York, and it really kind of coincided with our August meetup, so we're really excited. So Pitch Interactive is headquartered in Berkeley, California, and they do a lot of work with brands including Google, Wired, GE, Esquire, Scientific American, Popular Science, and the McKnight Foundation. They also do a lot of internal projects, and one of which was particularly moving a project called Drones, Out of Sight, Out of Mind, that probably most of you have seen. And so we're hoping to learn more about that today. So with that, are we good to go?
I think we are.
All right. So we'd like to welcome Wesley Grubbs from Pitch Interactive.
I'm just going to change the tone for a second. Sorry. Can we turn off the lights here? Yep. And for anyone in the back, sorry, that we just turned out the lights before we did that. But there are 2 seats here. If you guys don't want to sit in the back, it's going to be more comfortable. And there's a seat up here in the front. I would really encourage people in the back. There aren't many, but it's always nicer to be up close. I just totally pick the song randomly. Sometimes I play the music I listen to usually before I talk. if I'm not loud enough, instead of screaming that I'm not loud enough, you can just raise your hand and wave your hand and do something kind of funny with that. And maybe do that, you know, like a volume knob or. Okay. How's everyone doing? It's humid here. We're spoiled in the Bay Area with our weather because it's like the same thing all year long. So usually whenever I give a talk, I go through our work. I show sort of the process of our work. I talk a little bit about it. Where's our inspiration from in that work? What are our shortcomings, etc. Tonight I'm not doing any of that. I'm actually, the main focus is just on one piece, and one piece only. And what I wanted to actually do with this piece is, instead of our process and everything, maybe I can talk about it later, maybe you'll have questions. I wanted to show sort of why we did this piece. This piece in particular is about drone strikes. It's our drones piece. I guess here's a question. How many people have not seen it? It's fine if there are many. Good. Okay. The background of this is that Mike mentioned the clients that we work with, and about every year or year and a half, what we try to do is tell clients to fuck off for a month in a very polite, professional way, and do our own thing, because there's this whole sort of philosophy with us is that the kind of work that you do is the kind of work that people are going to pay you to do. And the more of that you do, the more of that you're going to get to do, essentially. We're always sort of like, I'm not doing enough of this. Well, try to find time to do that. And we're all leading busy lives. Probably you guys more than me. I'm in California, so it's like all chill all the time. But every once in a while, what we really try to do is we find something that personally sort of connects to us. And last March, it was the drone strikes. It's a whole drone debate. And it's been going around for a while, and for a couple of years, we mainly just heard our leaders that we want to trust, and we heard it in the media, and we really wanted to try to follow it. And so what I wanted to do was to first sort of, before we approach the whole drone debate, is to show you what I believed. Like, this is basically what we were told. And this is John Brennan. At this time, just over a year ago, he was assistant to the president of Homeland Security. Today, he's the director of the CIA. This is like 2.5 minutes, and it's really important to understand, to listen to the language that he uses. It's crucial. It's not new to us, but it's crucial to sort of focus on this.
The United States is more secure, and the American people are safer. Here's why. In Pakistan, Al-Qaeda's leadership ranks have continued to suffer heavy losses. These targeted strikes are legal. Attorney General Holder, Harold Koh, and Jay Johnson have all addressed this question at length. As a matter of domestic law, the Constitution empowers the President to protect the nation from any imminent threat of attack. The authorization for the use of military force, the AUMF, passed by Congress after the September 11th attacks, authorized the President to use all necessary and appropriate forces against those nations, organizations, and individuals responsible for 9/11. These targeted strikes against Al-Qaeda terrorists are indeed ethical and just. This brings me to my next point. Targeted strikes are wise. Remotely piloted aircraft, in particular, can be a wise choice because of geography. With their ability to fly hundreds of miles over the most treacherous terrain, strike their targets with astonishing precision, and then return to base. They can be a wise choice because of time, when windows of opportunity can close quickly, and there just may be only minutes to act. They can be a wise choice because they dramatically reduce the danger to U.S. personnel, even eliminating the danger altogether. Yet they are also a wise choice because they dramatically reduce the danger to innocent civilians, especially considered against massive ordnance that can cause injury and death far beyond their intended target. In addition, compared against other options, a pilot operating the aircraft remotely, with the benefit of technology and with the safety of distance, might actually have a clearer picture of the target and its surroundings, including the presence of innocent civilians. It's this surgical precision, the ability with laser-like focus to eliminate the cancerous tumor called an al-Qaeda terrorist while limiting damage to the tissue around it. That makes this counterterrorism tool so essential.
So this was just over a year ago, and it's still the rhetoric today. Obama, he doesn't talk about drones very much. It's the last resort. I've had many arguments with people about drones. It's kind of interesting. When you don't see the data, all you have is the information that you're told. And sometimes that's all we sort of have to go with, but we live in a day and age today where we're having a much better grasp of data collection and parsing that data and understanding and looking for those patterns. The biggest problem with drone strikes is that it's very hard to collect data about drone strikes because the CIA is not saying anything. And then what they say is completely misinformation. Up until a document was leaked yesterday, the CIA was not killing any civilians. But the problem is that civilians actually have been killed in many ways. So what happens is a drone strike hits the ground, and in this case it's Pakistan. Journalists go to that drone strike, and sometimes these journalists are from the BBC, from CNN, from Al Jazeera, from all over the place, and they interview as many locals as they can to get as much information. How many people died? Who were they? Were there any women or children? And once they collect enough information, they can get a really good estimate of what happened during this drone strike. This data set was collected by the Bureau of Investigative Journalism in London, and the background of this is Stanford and NYU did a comprehensive research on drone strike impacts on civilian populations called Living Under Drones. If you Google that, you'll find it. And I contacted the fellows at Stanford from the law department there, and I asked them, like, what is the most reliable data source? Because there are many, and they're all different all over the place. And they said the Bureau, by far, is the most accurate. It's the most legit. They can back up all their sources with multiple sources and back up their sources of sources. It's crazy. So I contacted this guy, Jack, at the Bureau, and they were more than happy to give us access to this data. It's a Google Fusion table, which basically means that we can hook into the data live. And so when there's a new drone strike and it's verified, they can update that database. And the work that I'm going to show you in a few minutes gets updated too. So we just heard John Brennan talk about the justifications for drone strikes. Up until before I saw this data itself, I wanted to believe that. Maybe it was just my disconnection with Pakistan. I don't have any relatives there or any friends for that matter. I have friends from there, but they haven't been there in so long. There's this disconnect with American society to regions of the world that we're actually attacking. When I started looking at this data, when I look at this as a person who analyzes data, very often I see holes. It's Swiss cheese. There's a couple of unknowns, but then there are all these blank. And I'll explain the data a little bit. On the left side is the region. Then there's an identifier. Then there's a date. The total number of fatalities. Civilians, and of those civilians, children. And then here's a short description. So basically from this we can sort of ascertain approximately how many people are being killed in this. But there's still so many unknown variables here. And we can sort of see here alleged militants, at least so many people died. We think there were children involved. And we took this data and we try to parse it in such a way that we can represent it. But before I even go to represent our data, there's one piece I have to show. I've never done this before, and it's a very sensitive topic, so I apologize. I'm not being over dramatized here. This, in a way, is called sort of data dramatization. It's a very new technique that very few data visualizations companies are doing. The reason why we do this is because we really believe in this. To understand the drone strike, John Brennan just talked about laser accuracy and surgical precision. And I was looking everywhere the other day for an animated GIF of a Star Trek, you know, 3 guys standing in a row and the middle guy gets zapped and he disappears and the other guys are like, oh my god, holy shit, he just got phased, or, you know, or something. And, but that's not what happens. We don't have lasers on drones. We might in 100 years or something, but not now. What we have are missiles. And when a missile hits the ground, it explodes. And when it explodes, there's shrapnel that flies around. There's a lot of things that happen. This is the data only of deaths, of fatalities. We don't even have data collected on people who are injured. But I wanted to give you a sense of what it's actually like to be under an attack. This is an airstrike in Bara. This is actually one in Syria, and this was made by a jet, not a drone. It's extremely similar, though. And the reason why I'm sort of touched by this, I lived in Croatia for 3 years, right after or actually during the NATO campaign against Serbia, just after the Balkan conflict there ended. All of my friends were affected. My wife was in a bunker for 6 months under a mortar artillery run. And when you start to see the impact of civilians under conflict, there's nothing, for me personally, more gut-wrenching than that. And I guess with this sort of, the context of this, you know, the real impact, this is something that you can't just show to the public all the time because people don't want to see it. It makes them uncomfortable. We'll watch Braveheart, as you know, until our hearts bleed. But the reality stuff is very hard for us to digest. So let us digest.
But wait.
This was an
I looked out the back window and I saw this incredible image. There's a huge plume of smoke, and that's the dust from rubble from what's clearly been a very big strike. And it's the casual way this woman was walking away, just pushing a pram. It's almost as if this happened every day. I want to see what's happened. And it's then that I decided that really we need to go and see what's happened.
This is an independent journalist, Ollie Lambert, that was filming this invitation.
I didn't really know what to expect, but it was almost certain that a number of people would have been killed and many more seriously injured.
بس اتجمعوا صراحة يعني عن جد خطر من الأمر. Ali, I think we should leave. Usually they come back.
Really?
Yeah. I think we should leave. We should leave.
So I chose to ignore my driver and felt this really should be seen. There's just this growing noise of the shouts and the screams and the whistles where you realise something very serious has happened. But it's only when you see things like this that you realise the real impact of civilian casualties in a civil war. This woman's panicking because she doesn't know where her children has been taken. She's probably half deaf from the sound of the blast. It's a very weird experience to be amongst all this, because one's first instinct is obviously to get out, but you've come a very long way to witness what is happening to ordinary people. So often when we see footage of airstrikes and munition strikes in conflict zones, and particularly in Syria, the focus is always on bodies. What's always more shocking is the ordinary people on the periphery of the bomb who are suddenly almost waking up to realise that their lives have been literally blown apart.
So, what Ollie's saying here, you know, the ordinary people around in their lives have been completely changed. John Brennan said at the very beginning of his speech that America is more secure because of drone strikes. But it's hard for me personally to believe that it's more secure when we are killing family members and people. It's a really interesting aspect to try to understand this. And so there are several ways to communicate this information so far. One is we have one side of the spectrum, the leadership. We have a data set that's a table of data. We have a documentary, the gut-wrenching part of this. And then we actually have, in many ways, sort of a new way of looking at this, data visualization. How can you visually represent this to get to a mass audience to help people understand? And then how can you justify what you're actually showing? So in order to see this piece, you actually have to see it in action. And I really hope my internet works. Yeah, I just tethered to my phone. And if not, I might have to tether again. Okay, we're good. So this is a piece that Mike mentioned, out of sight, out of mind. And this is a narrative. Somebody asked the question here, well, can immersion be linear? And the answer, what I would say personally is yes. It can be very linear. All the numbers you see here are dynamic, by the way, too. It's updated automatically. So at the end of the last clip that we saw, the video, the guy said, "May God, burn you in hell, Bashar." In Pakistan, they're saying, "May God burn you in hell, America." And now you can kind of understand a little bit why. This is interactive. We plugged in all the data. Each one of these squares that you see here represents a victim. You can roll over it. You can see how many people were killed in this attack. Unfortunately, we don't have the injured. I mean, it's a very wild region of the world. You don't have hospitals set up the way we do and people collecting that kind of information. A lot of the data is collected after the fact. And it's really touching. What we actually tried to do, though, I wanted to still try to believe that it was right. And so we plugged in this data for, okay, high profile, like let's really get the people we can actually name. Shah Faisal, he was a leader of Hakim Mullah Mossad. Okay, let's actually find those people we can name and we can identify them. And we can actually say they are part of the Taliban, they're part of the Al-Qaeda. These are the people that apparently are a threat to us. But the rest here, okay, we have children, civilian, which is basically women and elderly, and you have this other group. The Obama administration calls this military combatants. What it legally is any male between the ages of 14 and 40 is automatically a military combatant unless evidence is brought forth to prove their innocence. And it just so happens Pakistan has evidence proving centers where you can go in and bring your documents, and people, they're not going to go and try to prove somebody's innocence in that regard. They're just angry. But what's shocking to me is the surgical precision is this. 48 people out of over 3,100 deaths. This is a surgical precision. For me, it's about as precise as if we're trying to get a tumor out with like a really smooth rock. We want to smash it out. Then I guess that's precise. It's crazy when you really think that this is how we're actually doing that. So interesting aspect with this. the visual representation of data through this. This project was actually done on our own time, on our own dime. That's what I mentioned before. It took us about 4 weeks to do. When we first launched this, I had no idea what was going to happen. I didn't care, honestly. I should have at least had a press package, because we got bombarded in a major way. We even had, I mean, it's Berkeley. I mean, we have people like knocking on our door. Like, dude, like, come with us. Like, we're going to go campaign right now. And I was like, no, I got to work now. I'm out of money, guys. Like, come on. But just, I guess to give you a little bit of background, I just have a few, like 2 more slides. Personally, like the way that I try to approach data visualization, I have a background in programming and a background, I guess, in creativity and art and design. Very recently, I've sort of embraced that. I've always been like, no, I'm not a designer at all. I'm just like an engineer. I have a degree in international economics. I'm from Arkansas, so totally rural place. And in a way, I think that has impacted me more than anything, because when I sort of became of age and started realizing how shitty it was there, actually, I think I realized that when I was really young. When I was able to like drive and like go places and stuff like that, I started questioning everything that I was sort of raised to believe. And it's, for me, like my whole life mission is unlearning so many things that I learned, even if I learned those in my adulthood, and questioning everything that I'm told. Not in a dickish way, but just to sort of, is that right? Like, how can we verify that? You know, another example, like the last project that we did before the drones, a year and a half earlier, was a visual comparison between the Bible and the Quran. So, growing up in the South, Quran's not really a welcome book. And the Bible is definitely, I mean, it's the Bible Belt. People call me the grubworm at church, you know, my Baptist church I went to, because I really studied the Bible. And I actually was very interested in it, especially from a literary way. And then several years ago, you had people here in Florida trying to burn the Quran, and you even had congressmen, like our leaders, saying the Quran is a book of terror, and there's this black or white sort of episode of it. So I built this sort of tool where I wanted to visualize the entire Bible and the entire Quran side by side. The brown over here, this is the Old Testament of the Bible. The new, this is the Quran, King James Version. This is a British translation as close to the King James Version as we can get, so that linguistically they would be very similar. We have a word you can search. There's a synonym API that pulls in similar words to that. It's a free API, so it's not the best tool in the world, but it was the only free one that we had. It was actually the only one that we could get without making it ourselves. And then you have some statistical references. You have relative comparison to one another and whatnot. Each one of these dark dots is where that word is used in a verse. So each dot itself actually represents a verse. I'll kind of show you this in action. Note the top here, occurrences between the two. So you have relative frequency, like the percentage of that verse usage. And then you have the number of occurrences. And it's just some sort of, interesting comparison. The Quran was written after the Bible, so obviously Allah would not be in it. And now let's look at words like terror, And yes, the Quran might relatively have more, but look at the occurrences. 448 to 170. I mean, Deuteronomy is like, whoa, holy shit. Still scares me. It gives me nightmares, to think about it. And you can see that you can actually roll over every single one of these squares and read that verse. So you can read, if you have surgically precise hands, you can read the entire Bible and the entire Quran on one screen. And I wanted to do that. I wanted to give it this. Forgiveness is actually talked about much more in the Quran. Not just relative frequency, but also total occurrences, which is also an interesting aspect. But, it's... Yeah, and no skateboard. When you're testing stuff, you want to make sure it does the things you expect it to do. So if Jesus had a skateboard, maybe I'd go back to religion. But it's interesting in the context of you know, enough with this black or white bullshit. You know, like let's inform ourselves and sort of broaden our perspective. And you know, after you're looking at this, you're not going to walk away and say, oh, the Quran actually has more relative frequency of the word terror. You know, that's not the case. I think it's just a matter of understanding these books have much more similarities than they actually do differences. And that is just sort of an exploration for us and what we really enjoy doing. So that's all I have. And thank you. Sorry for getting all mushy early on. Like, I don't usually do that. I've been watching this video like dozens of times over the last few days, so I'm like emotionally a little rattled, and I've never done that before. So yeah. Are there any questions? Good.
I have one.
Okay.
So I was following your Twitter feed, and I saw that you had posted the different screen comps of kind of you know, as you kind of got to the final UI. And that was just a really interesting process to see kind of where you started and where you ended.
Right.
If you could speak to that a little bit, that would be really cool. Or you don't have to show it, but it was just like, there were 5 or really, it was like very significant steps. It was just very interesting to see how it evolved.
One thing I'll show with this is, yeah, we like to play with different perspectives. So this is not like the single solitary perspective they use here. The other one is, you can change this and switch it and actually see more about victim information. But we played with this idea first. And like, do we do this vertically, horizontally? My whole goal was, I want to highlight every victim and give insights into these, even if we could use photos. And eventually we want to do that. There are projects out there to try to collect personal information on these victims. And there's actually quite a bit on children and whatnot so far, but yeah, I mean, it was the idea of aesthetics with this, with the actual trajectory at the top is always random. So it starts at a random point and it comes down. I mean, even the way that we program this is we want to keep the metaphor similar to the reality. So we don't know where drone strikes are coming from. That's the crazy part about it. Like I showed you this part of Syria, you can hear a jet. Drones you cannot hear. It's an invisible force. And imagine living in a society where there's an invisible force constantly flying overhead that can strike you at any moment. I mean, there's a case in the New York Times I was just reading earlier where there was a cleric in a town in Pakistan that spoke out against the Taliban or Al-Qaeda. And he was just against them and he denounced them in his village and whatnot. And they sent people from Al-Qaeda to go there and talk with him. And they brought him next to a palm tree to discuss whatever it was. And at that moment, a drone strike hit and killed everybody there, including the camel that was tied to the tree. And so it's, you know, it's these kind of things. It's like, is it justified? Is it not? Everyone's going to have their opinion. We're humans. We're subjective. And you know, it's stories like this though that it makes me have to question. You know, we're a country of righteousness and we're trying to do good things, and we believe we are. I'm like all the time try to believe that we're going in a good direction, but in order to go in a good direction, you have to question yourself. You have to put yourself in check all the time, and I just think that that's important. You know, and what's interesting is like this is a personal project. You know, we do stuff for banks, for corporations, for you know, we just did something, we just signed on with UC Davis, helping to redesign the tree of life using genome sequence data. I mean, we're all over the place because data is data. I mean, there are points, there are attributes, and the way it's defined, you can almost be agnostic about it. And then once you start to study it, then you see those patterns and you understand it. And a lot of people hire us because we come from the outside. We kind of think out of the box in that regard. So, okay, now there it is. Yeah.
Have you ever thought of, because part of the process, you know, you're only as good as your intelligence, and I've been doing a lot of work in civilian casualties, doing a movie on one, because it seemed like the only way I could really know what actually happened. And what I've been struck by is how different the data is on civilian casualties. This is, I'm working in Afghanistan. You know, the UN, AU, everybody's. Do you think there's a way to use big data visualizations to sort of bust the lack of accurate data.
No. I mean, just don't think data visualizations are a silver bullet. You know,
No,
I mean, you know, we're subjective. I'm using reds. That's the color of blood. You know, I mean, it's even if you're selecting a color in an Excel bar chart, you as a human are selecting a color that you like. You know, even though you may not like it because there are only like 16 colors available, but you like that more than the other, or you hate that less than the rest. I guess is, you know, and so that's. The data sources come from all over the place, and even how verify our data, like how valid is our census data that we have. They send out a pamphlet to households that you mail back, and you know, how can you verify that for sure?
Right, but say here, this looks so devoid of, you know, it just looks so certain.
Right.
You know, but if you were to take the different data sets, the UN data sets, the Afghan government, the whatever, could you think you could make something that would tell the story of how different data is?
You could. I think somebody should. You know, just in the sense of, hey, there's this perspective, and there's this, like Obama's unemployment graph that Edward Tufte did with him. You can twist data in any way. I mean, we're humans, and the reality is that even when we see a visualization, we want to see something that backs up our beliefs. And what I want to do with this, like my goal is, I don't want to stand by one side or the other. Like you saw personally, I obviously do. I want, the people I'm really trying to engage are the people like me before I started this project. People who assumed something but didn't really know. And then when I saw this, especially with Obama, I was like, wow, like I really agree with him on so many things. And there was one point where we paused it where he won his Nobel Peace Prize. I'm laughing, but we had to take that out because it would have been very obvious, like, you know, it's totally subjective. But he won his Nobel Peace Prize right here, you know, and it's like, wow, okay, you know, good for him. So it's interesting, but there is this subjectivity. I think that we all have it, and because we all stand somewhere. There's another question?
Well, it's kind of connected, and that is that, you know, for those of us who are oriented to the space from a human rights perspective, and something like this is such a powerful story, really. I mean, it may be data, but like you said, it's subjective. It's a very powerful story. And I'm curious about the people who are knocking on your door and some of the ways in which this did get used for advocacy purposes or not, and how you felt about that, given that, I mean, you're kind of like in this sort of almost the artist agnostic, wanting to make a statement. It's interesting to hear you telling the story the way you are, and then clearly it has these very big repercussions and possible impact in the world. So I'm curious about sort of where you place yourself in that. And my second question to you is that, you know, if an organization, a not-for-profit, had come to you and said, we really want to work with you on something like this, how much would it have cost?
Ooh, yeah, it's a sticky point. It's sticker shock usually for people.
Right, but it's not fun to know what's feasible, right? Just say it.
Yeah, just say it. I mean, it can cost like from $5,000 to $50,000, you know, for doing this for the time. It totally depends on your skill set, you know, and $5 to $50,000. No. Ours, it would have been somewhere in the middle, maybe higher.
Like 25K.
I don't know if I could afford that. You know, I mean, we live in an expensive part of the world. So, I mean...
You're saying like $50,000?
Well, let's not talk money. Let's go to the first question.
You don't want me to...
I mean, we did this for free. Okay, we did this for ourselves. So, it cost us a little bit more than that from our own money. Let's put it that way.
Okay, that's
when we did this.
That's
because it was the time that we did not spend on a client. We spent it on ourselves. So where do I set myself with this? There is a sense of agnostic sort of, I wasn't trying to take a stand with anybody or any group, and with these activists knocking on the door, well, you can protest with us. It's like, I'm not effective walking on the street with a picket sign. I'm effective with this. And I know that you and your picket sign, like, cool, go save the bees or whatever you do. Like Berkeley likes to save the bees a lot. And all kinds of other stuff I won't even go into. But it's interesting because I want to be sort of to myself, and it was the biggest surprise to me was the Arab community. Like, I was not expecting this to be in Iranian news and obviously all over Pakistan, But it just, like, I saw, like, our web traffic, like, as the world was waking up. It was like, holy crap. Like, the end of the first week when this went out, like, my only response was no more comments, like, almost nervous breakdown. Because it was, like, hundreds and hundreds of emails. And I didn't see anything bad, you know. I think there was one guy on Reddit who said that we were manipulating the data because we should only show the last 2 years, where there's a steady decline. And I was like, how is that? Oh, it's Reddit. Okay, I'm not even going to respond. And I think there's a guy from India who was angry because the deal is with the drones in Pakistan is we're not at war with Pakistan. I mean, it's a very deep topic. We have bases in Pakistan. We give them drones, and we give them lots of money. So that way we can fly our drones from Pakistan soil. They don't leave the country, and we solve the biggest dickus problem in Pakistan. You know, like the ego issue of like, oh, you came and got Osama bin Laden. Well, you know, who's talking about the drone strikes? You know, and that's because Pakistanis are like, oh, these are ours. The biggest increase here was not because of Obama. It was Musharraf resigning, and that's another big thing to understand. Musharraf was really like standoffish. Like he really fought the CIA. He had clout at the White House, and he was trying to stop these, especially after that madrasa was bombed with 69 children, some of them 7 years old. You know, I mean, you know, and it was the biggest cover-up for months. The Pakistani army was saying that they were responsible for that, and they were trying to get some person hiding, and then they retracted it. And when they retracted it, the CIA came forward and said this is a terrorist training camp for children, like, you know, Hitler Jugend, you know, like the young terrorists. And I'm like, these are 7 years old, you know, like, how dare it? You know, it's interesting when you look at that. So.
I was wondering.
There's no revenue for that. Actually, we released this free. Like, anyone who wanted to embed it anywhere, I was like, go for it. And they did, you know, like The Guardian and Economist, and it was everywhere, like crazy. So go ahead.
If you see yourself creating these kinds of charts or these things over the next 20 years, you imagine them having a specific connection to one another, influence one another, and having this one chart that just pretty much graphs all the charts?
I have a personal rule of thumb. I don't plan 2 years ahead. I just let life go as it goes, you know, and I don't know what life is going to be like in 2 years. It would be great if they were tied together and in the future look back and say, oh, look.
Do you see that connection with the ones that you have created? Like how your mind?
Maybe. I mean, obviously the Bible, Quran. I mean, we're friends with the Arab world right now. It's kind of crazy, but I mean, I play soccer. Like this bruise here, you can probably see it. It's like I play soccer every Sunday with these Iranians. It's great. And they no gentle hands. You know, it's like wow. But this is like client work that we do. Like this is something we did for Wired magazine a couple of years ago, visualizing. Since we're in New York, 311 calls in New York when the city of New York received its 100 billionth call. This is before the API was made. Starts at midnight, ends at midnight. You can see people are kind of sleeping, sort of. And you can see the biggest complaint, which is the top 25 complaints from 311 calls. This was one, I'm not going to play it. It's like a big interactive glitter ball kind of thing that bounces around. We did this with Google about a year ago. So, I mean, we really enjoy what we do for clients as well. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to bash our clients. We love our clients in many ways. But there are times when you just need a break, you know, and you need to say, what do we want to do? So, I'm talking way too much. Are there any last questions? Yeah. Oh, there are more. Okay.
Yeah, I know there are tools like Popcorn.js allow you to add dynamic data to video.
Right.
Can you recommend any other tools that will help with the visualization of dynamic data?
And I'm going to try to say it as short as possible, but I think that there are tons of JavaScript libraries that are really helpful, but I would really, I would recommend that you try to learn JavaScript raw, you know. I mean, there's jQuery, D3 is amazing and all that, but understand the construct and how it works. And then you can start to understand these frameworks better. And what I always tell people who don't code, like I spoke 2 weeks ago at a Girls Who Code event in UC Davis. It was like the coolest thing I ever saw. Like, I'm like in a room of like 30 programmers and I'm the only dude. I was like, this is, wow, this is cool. And I just said if you really want to learn to code, it's not hard. You don't need to be some like gizmo head or something like that. Give yourself time every day, just like exercise. It's like learning a language. Give yourselves 30 minutes or half an hour a day just fiddling around, just playing. I mean, that's how I learned. I never formally learned how to code. I never formally took a design class. I mean, the closest I took to design was photography. Other than that, it was like economics and database design and like really boring neural networking systems like in Arkansas. I mean, it was boring and crazy at the same time, so there's a lot of impact to that. Okay, more questions? Okay, yeah, you guys can come up here too. I'm sure some people want to get out of here.
Cool, thanks, Wes.
Yeah.
All right, so we're going to wrap things up. So thanks for coming. Thanks to the presenters. What a great night. Really appreciate everyone coming. Thanks again. Our next meetup will be here on August 20th, and then September 17th, we'll have the team from Hollow, the interactive documentary that was mentioned earlier. Looking forward to that. Thanks, everyone.